In the horse world, we are so quick to judge our horse's behavior for being bad or naughty or disrespectful. But in a lot of cases, they're actually just overwhelmed and they've reached their capacity. So today I'm going to show you 4 different things that overwhelm might look like in our horses. And I'm also going to show you some different strategies for helping to increase your horse's capacity so that they don't reach overwhelm so quickly, as well as some strategies for bringing your horse back from a state of overwhelm so that they're actually in a workable place. If you're new, I'm Ruby. I'm a whole horse stewardship trainer. I've helped horses and humans just like you to have a deeper bond and better relationship for over 10 years. And today I'm going to be sharing with you some of those things that I've learned over those 10 years about horse behavior and understanding how horses and humans work together. And we're specifically going to be talking about overwhelm. So a couple of really important things to talk about before we get into the specific nitty-gritties of this. First is that our horses, when they, and just like people too, we're the same, when our horses switch into overwhelm, they'll switch into their fight or flight center of their brain. And when they're there, they're not reachable with logic, or they don't have the capacity to be like thinking. So we can say like horses are either in the reactive part of their brain or the thinking part of their brain. And in order to keep them in that thinking part, we need to keep their stress levels low so they don't switch to reaction. And once they get to reaction, the big key is to figure out how to bring your particular horse back to the thinking part. Now, one important thing about this that I'm going to get more into in a minute is that I think, in my experience, that not all horses need the same tactics to come back to the thinking part of their brain, and not all horses get triggered to the reactive part by the same things. So a lot of times, we see like a lot of online trainers or, like a lot of this short form content that is just like kind of portrayed as here's the magic fix. And the reality is that probably is a magic fix for a lot of horses, but probably not all horses. And so my goal in this video is actually to help you have a deeper understanding of your own horse and also methods that work for you. Because the bottom line is, if it works for me, that's great. But if I can't teach that to you and have you go actually use it and work for your horse, it's pointless. So we're going to be working on those things today. So I think of a horse's capacity for stress or discomfort like a cup or a bucket. And it's specifically important that it's a cup or bucket that you can't see through. So this is something that, is opaque. We can't see what's on the inside. And all of the little stressors that happen to our horses add something to that cup or bucket. So when you go, let's say, to get your horse out of their stall and they're dozing and you surprise them when you come in, that maybe adds a little bit of discomfort or stress. And then let's say you walk them to the tie rail and they try to stop to get a snack and you smack them on the shoulder with your lead rope. That adds a little bit more. And then they go to the tie rail and you tie them up and there's a dog barking and running around behind them. And there's a bit more. And then you put their cinch on, you saddle them and cinch them, and you cinch them kind of quickly and maybe a little bit too tight right at first, and they kind of pin their ears and get a little angry. That adds a bit more there. And then maybe you're like walking over to the mounting block and a big truck goes by that makes a big noise. And that adds a little bit more. And oops, we overflowed. And so what that overflow looks like in horses can look really different depending on the horse. But the fact is the capacity ran out and we didn't see that building. It looked like our horse was okay with all of those corrections and the little minor spooks and the little minor discomforts. But we got to a place where that actually was too much and their capacity couldn't hold it anymore. And so something that normally wouldn't be scary, like a truck going by that makes a weird noise, is just the final straw, right? The drop in the bucket that overflows it. And that's when we see these big reactions and we're like, why are you being so silly? Like, that was totally unreasonable. You're being ridiculous. And the reality is that maybe that one moment, that truck going by, wouldn't have been spooky on its own, but in the context of all of this other stuff going on, your horse just didn't have room anymore. So let's talk about the different types. Putting away my demo bucket. Okay. One really quick disclaimer before I get into the other stuff in this video is if you have a horse with a truly dangerous level of explosion or anything that you feel is outside of your scope of skill or confidence or safety, I never ever want you to put yourself in a dangerous situation with your horse, and I'm always going to recommend that you work with a trainer. Please find a trainer that has aligned values with you. So I think about horses as 4 main personality types, and these are just created by me as a way to sort of shorthand what I've noticed about some of the differences in horses' personalities. Other trainers will have different methods, and whatever makes sense for your brain is totally fine. And of course, there's lots of variation within this. So not all horses within these categories are going to be exactly the same. But generally, this helps to kind of distill down an approach that might work more appropriately for your particular horse. If you want to know more about what type of horse you have, I do have a free personality quiz linked below that will help to kind of diagnose what personality type your horse is. And it'll also give you instant information that might help you understand your horse a little bit better when you complete that quiz. So I highly recommend checking that out, but you don't have to for this. You might be able to gather enough just from hearing what I'm talking about with the 4 different types. So the first type is a feeler, and feelers are highly sensitive, but they lack the inner self-confidence. And so these are the types that little tiny things feel really big to them. Feelers really get their confidence from a calm, confident handler, and they can be really, really in tune with their handler, which can be amazing when it's going well. But when it's not going well, often this looks like the horse that's feeding off of your nervous energy and becoming more nervous and escalating, which makes you more nervous, which makes them more nervous, and both of your adrenaline is rising. So feelers generally actually have a very low capacity, but they also generally are, if you know the right buttons to push, they're generally easy enough to bring back. The exception to this is horses that really don't have the skill, that haven't been taught how to come back. They kind of top out and then they're done and they're unreachable and they're really hard to come back. So with feelers especially, it's really important to teach them methods for coming back to you when something scary happens. The other thing with the feelers, the more you try to force them to not react and try to punish them for reacting or hold them back or try to contain that energy, the more they become what I think of like a shaken can of soda. The pressure is building and building within this container, and it finally runs out of space and it just explodes. And so the typical feelers are like thoroughbreds, right? Like we think about the stereotypical thoroughbred is like a horse that is sensitive and athletic, and then something sets them off and they kind of explode and they're really hard to reach. So with a feeler, the really important thing is that we're practicing when they're in a good mood, adding little bits of stressors, little bits of pressure, and bringing them back. What it looks like when a feeler's cup is filling, if you watch your horse really closely, you'll notice they kind of just hold a little extra tension in their body. They tend to stand a little bit taller. Their eyes maybe get a little wide. Their face gets really tight. And these are really minor clues. So you have to really learn to pay really close attention if you have a feeler, but you'll see that. And often that's just a moment before they have an explosion. So if you see that and you can catch it, a lot of times giving them somewhere for that energy to go is the answer for a feeler. So bending them on a circle, lunging them around you, zigzagging them back and forth toward the scary object, giving that energy a job is generally what's going to bring that feeler back. So we're practicing these skills outside of the context of a scary situation. So on a day that they're having a good day, you might do something like introduce the flag or take them on a walk and look for scary things and practice the skill of approaching something scary and then retreating when they relax, and really focusing in on those tiny little minor things, not letting them get to the point of exploding, but looking for those moments where you see that tension building, you can feel the pressure building inside them, and then giving them an outlet for that energy and then bringing them back to a state of calm and flexing that muscle of going to the brink and coming back and going to the brink and coming back. If your horse explodes, you've pushed too much, there's too much pressure there, it's going to be a lot harder to bring a feeler back from that place. So practicing increasing the comfort zone, increasing the capacity of that bucket or cup. The next type is going to be the achiever. I happen to be very familiar with the achiever because my horse is classic achiever. Achievers are also very sensitive. They are kind of the type of horses that can read your mind, but they also are super bold and confident. So they kind of get the reputation of being a diva or being dramatic. And so an achiever, a lot of times there is no building. Every time a little thing gets dropped in that cup, you see it on their face. They're telling you everything they're feeling all the time. So, you surprise them in their stall and they're going to make a big deal about that. And then you walk them past the hay and you have to swap them away and they're going to make a really big deal about that. And then you cinch them too tight and it's going to be a big deal. Every little thing that goes in there becomes a big deal. But the great thing about achievers is it becomes a big deal and then it's gone. So they're pretty good at emptying their own bucket and building their own capacity. The difficult thing with an achiever is if something big happens, it's a really big deal. And so those moments that, you're like, why are you being so silly? Why are you being so ridiculous? This is really not a big deal. To them, it feels like it is, but it's also redraining and emptying that cup so that they have more capacity for the next thing that maybe feels like a big deal to them. So, if you have an achiever, what you're going to be doing is practicing making those things not such a big deal. So, we're going to be practicing. I have a whole video on sacking out, but like a sacking out method in which you're really looking for your horse to show calm relaxation under pressure. The other thing with an achiever is like, let's say that you, I don't know, like let's use the example of you cinch them a little bit too tightly and that becomes a really big deal and they start like throwing a little bit of a tantrum about it. You're going to hold the pressure on that cinch until they relax. And as soon as they relax, you're going to let it go. And then you're going to cinch them again and hold that pressure till they relax. And then you're going to let it go. And the idea with an achiever is you're holding the pressure that made them uncomfortable, that gave them that reaction until they relax. And then when you let it go, they learn that the relaxation is actually what helps them cope with the pressure, not having the big reaction. So a lot of times with achievers, we get into this cycle of they have a big reaction, we get scared, we back off, and the reaction gets bigger and bigger and bigger every time. And we don't want that. So we want to make sure we're holding that pressure, we're holding the line, we're being patient, we're staying calm and relaxed, we're being unflustered by it. And as soon as they show that they're relaxing under that pressure, then that's when we take the pressure away. And that's what's going to teach that horse to have a smaller reaction every time instead of escalating it bigger and bigger and bigger. The next type is the cruiser. Now, cruisers are the type that look like nothing's going on. They are very stoic. The problem with this is that that cup is still filling and they tend to have a pretty big capacity. So they might be able to really let that cup get full. And we just are not seeing it because they don't tell us. It's not like a feeler where they're like trying to bottle it. They just like, it really doesn't bother them. And then all of a sudden something might flip in them. And then they're kind of like, it's especially shocking because they have such a big capacity that it really takes a lot to set them off. Now, cruisers are not very sensitive and they also lack that kind of bold confidence that the achievers have. And so with cruisers, the big key is to just give them space to calm down. So if I have a cruiser that gets really wound up, a lot of times I'll actually just like stop and let them stand for a minute and think about life. And then we try the thing again. People are often worried that this is going to teach a bad habit. And if you have an achiever or a voyager or even a feeler, yes, this would absolutely not be the move because this will ingrain in them as a bad habit. But with the cruisers, sometimes they just need a minute to decompress. And then once they've had that deep breath and decompression, then you can go try that thing again. And often they have a little bit more mental space and clarity to get through it. The big thing with a cruiser is they definitely get the reputation for being stubborn, and you do not want to let them win. Stopping and taking a break is not letting your cruiser win as long as you come back and finish that fight before, we shouldn't call it a fight, finish that conversation before you are done for the day. So we're not going to move on to a different task. So like, let's give a really classic cruiser example. You get to you're like riding around the arena and you get by the gate and they just stop and plant. And they're like, I'm not going forward. I'm going out that gate. You can kick and kick and kick and kick all you want. And you can disincentivize them from standing at that gate all you want. And they're just going to stay planted there because they're so stubborn. And a lot of times with the cruiser, if you just stop and take a deep breath and wait for them to take a deep breath and then say, we're not stopping at the gate and walk on. Now you've won that battle, even if you stopped there for a moment. Again, if you have any other personality type, this is probably not going to work for you. But with the cruiser specifically, as long as you continue your ride after that moment, you're still winning. You're still okay. And then the big key is when you're done with the ride for the day, you're stopping away from the gate. So you're going to stop in the furthest corner from the gate, let them stand and think about life for a minute, and then you're going to get off and hand walk them out. So, okay, that covers our first three types. The fourth type is the Voyager. Voyagers are not very sensitive also, but they are super bold and confident. And so if you have a Voyager, these are the type that kind of can be like a bit bulldozery. They have a really big capacity like the cruisers do, simply because they lack the sensitivity that the feelers and achievers have that causes them to overflow so rapidly. But because they're also really bold and confident, they don't tend to actually have those big explosions most of the time, but they will let you know. They'll give you a little bit more clue if things are uncomfortable for them than the cruiser will. They're not as stoic. Hi, Butter. You coming to say hi? Yeah. So if you have the baby entrance, if you have the type that is the Voyager type, all you're going to do is just kind of, it's actually going to be the easiest type for this because they don't hit overwhelm very easily. When they do hit overwhelm, all you're going to do is just give them a redirection. You're just going to be like, yep, that was scary. And now we're going to like go look at this thing, or we're going to kind of continue on over here. And so what you're working on is creating a situation in which your horse is just having this redirect so that they're not worried about, sorry, trying to cover my child's face. He's privacy, but he doesn't understand because he's a baby. We're working on creating a redirect to keep them from fixating on this very thing and just using their curiosity, their innate curiosity that they already have, to give them something else to think about. Okay, my time is up, clearly. Boss says we're done. But if you have other questions, leave them in the comments. I'll link some more videos that might be helpful to you below. And until next time, make sure to hug your horse for me.